It was a fine July morning when I skipped down the steps into the quad. The manicured grass stood out green against the stone buildings and surrounding gravel paths. As a member of the staff, I was privileged to walk upon that hallowed turf. The sun was already warm and a blackbird sang his heart out as I breathed in the fresh morning air. Most of the pupils had gone home for the summer, and I had just locked up my lab. I had 8 weeks to spend in this idyllic part of rural England. Still, it felt to me as if I had simply exchanged one prison for another. True, I could come and go as I pleased. People, especially the parents, treated me with respect, and I could even carry on an affair with Wendy, the school matron. However, I'd never be able to go back to my hometown, and I couldn't marry Wendy. I was going to grow into a lonely old man with no more to look forward to than that blackbird. Strange, it didn't seem to bother him the way it bothered me. I was still feeling sorry for myself when a voice came from behind me. Well, if you've got to hide, I can think of worse places to do it. I turned to see a young man leaning against the wall beside the arch I had just walked under. He smiled as he spoke. He looked quite pleased with himself. I'd soon put a stop to that. Are you talking to me? I'm not hiding from anyone. Come off it, Dad. To just disappear as effectively as you did. And for it to take more than 2 years to find you, you had to be hiding. I haven't a clue what you were talking about. Now, unless you are a parent or an employee here, you are trespassing. I suggest you leave and don't come back. I took up my privilege to walk across the grass and made for the arch in the opposite wall. As I walked away, I heard him calling after me. I'm not going until you talk to me, Dad. We have things to discuss. Leave me alone. I have no children. Just go away. I strode quickly through the cloisters towards my flat. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps ringing out on the flagstones. I pulled out my key and let myself in, closing the door behind me. He hammered on the door several times before shouting through the letterbox. You'll have to come out sometime. I'm not going anywhere. I just want to talk to you. I was trembling as I started to make myself some coffee. It had been 5 years or more since I'd felt this way. I sat down at my kitchen table and tried to regain my self-control. I heard voices outside and then a key in the door. I turned and was relieved to see Wendy Turnbull come in, closing the door behind her. I breathed a sigh of relief. She had a puzzled look on her face as she spoke. Derek, there is a young man sitting outside your door. He claims to be your son. Is there something you haven't told me? He's not my son. He is mistaken. I have no children. I told you that. Yes, Derek. I know you did and I believe you. But why does that young man believe he is your son? Why are you so shaken by his presence? I looked into Wendy's beautiful blue eyes. She was the one ray of light in a dark 5 years. She was the matron at Clifton Manor College and looked after the physical and emotional well-being of the boys. Minnie is the homesick 11-year-old who has found himself sobbing into her ample bosom as he cried for his mummy. The older boys would give their right arms for a similar cuddle. Even in her nurse's uniform, she looked lovely to me. Over the last 2 years, we had struck up a relationship and had got to the stage where we each had a key for the other's flat. In fact, the only thing stopping us from sharing a flat was the talk amongst the boys and the effect it might have on the school if the parents found out. I sat down with my head in my hands. I am so sorry, Wendy. There are things about me you don't know, and that young man is a reminder of a time I'd rather forget. Nevertheless, he is not my son. He may think he is, but he is wrong. So tell me, Derek, why would he think he is your son? Because I'm married to his mother. Wendy sat down, a shocked look on her face. Well, that certainly explains a few things. You mean like why I haven't asked you to marry me? Yes, that's the reason I can't marry you or anyone else, because I'm still married to her. So divorce her. I can wait. I can't divorce her without revealing my whereabouts, though that might be academic now. Now I'm really worried, Derek. Have you done something bad? Is that why you don't want to be found? I've done nothing that I haven't paid for, but if they find me now, they will put me back in prison. Wendy reached out and took my hands down from my face, holding them in her hands. Okay, Derek Callahan, first you're going to tell me the whole story. Then we are going to get that young man in here and find out what he wants. It all started a little over 5 years ago, or at least that's when I realized what was happening. Dirty Harry, they used to call me. I thought it was just because I shared a surname with the lead character in the movie. I soon found out there was another reason. Just like Harry, I always seemed to get all the shit jobs. It wasn't always so. I had worked at Bronseston College for 10 years and always did my fair share of evening and weekend classes, but no more than anyone else. However, shortly after John Preston was appointed vice principal, things began to change. At first, I thought my job was under threat because I went from always exceeding my teaching hours to having to offer myself to other departments just to get close to my minimum. The thing about being below minimum hours was you couldn't refuse any course you were offered. I soon found myself working to 9 p.m. 4 nights a week, not to mention the weekend courses I had to do. My wife, Jessica, was faculty secretary, and when John Preston was promoted, he took her with him, so she worked normal office hours. We were becoming like ships that pass in the night. My sex life was in the toilet. I got home at 9:30 p.m. and needed at least an hour to wind down before going to bed. Jessica turned in at 10 and would almost always be asleep when I went to bed. I told Jess I would quit the college rather than continue to destroy our marriage, but she urged me to be patient and things would work out. Halfway through my second year of such treatment, I finally reached the end of my tether. My subject area was electronics, but I had to deliver mathematics and physics because, I was told, no demand existed for electronics. I was somewhat surprised when a colleague who ran the general engineering course approached me. "Derek, I've got a little problem. I've got to deliver an electronics unit, and I haven't got a clue about the subject. I'm a mechanical man. Give me friction, drag factors, and equilibrium, and I'm the man, but this stuff, you can't see it and can't feel it. How do I teach that? I've got a few books on the subject, but I need some advice on how to deliver it and what practical work to give them." "Hang on, John. Are you under hours or something?" "Good God. No. I'm into overtime for this. That doesn't make sense. I'm under hours and I'm available. I'll do it for you." George Johnson, my head of department, looked up with a surprised look on his face as I strode into his office. "Good morning, George. I've come to save you some money. I'm always up for that, Derek. What do we have to do?" "John wants someone to deliver the electronics unit in his course. He is over hours. You'll have to pay him overtime. If I do it, you don't have to pay overtime, and I'll be up to minimum hours and won't have to keep accepting weekend work." "Sorry, Harry. Oops, Derek. No can do. But why not? It doesn't make sense, and the students will do better if I teach them." John admits he doesn't have a clue. "I'm sorry, Derek, but just like you, I have to do as I'm told." "You mean that somebody has instructed you to keep me under hours?" "I can't say any more, Derek." Full of anger, I stormed into the head of faculty's office. I put the same deal to him and got the same sort of response. It seemed I had enemies in high places. I moved up the chain of command. Sooner or later, I must get to someone who couldn't pass the buck upwards. Jessica was somewhat surprised when I strode through the office and arrived at her boss' door. "You can't just go in, Derek. You have no appointment. He's busy." I walked in and found John Preston, our vice principal, sat at his desk talking into the telephone. He motioned me to sit down. I sat fuming while he finished his call. Eventually, he put down the phone, shuffled a few papers, then turned to me and smiled. "Now, Derek, what's got you so hot under the collar that you burst in here interrupting my phone call?" "I'm trying to find out who is deliberately keeping me below minimum hours, even when it costs the college money to do so. So far, everything points to you, unless you are going to tell me that you are only following orders so that I have to go and talk to the principal. I've no idea what you are talking about, Derek. Why don't you explain it to me?" John Preston was a tall, slim man with gray hair and piercing blue eyes. I looked into those eyes as I told him the story, hoping something would tell me that I'd got the right man. Not a flicker showed as he told me he was most concerned that the college was spending money it didn't have. When I'd finished, he got up, walked around, and opened the door. He looked straight at me. "Well, Derek, thank you for bringing this to my attention. You can rest assured that I will get to the bottom of it as soon as I get back from the Association of Colleges conference." "When will that be then, John?" "Well, I leave tomorrow and I will be in Brighton for the next 3 days, so it will be Monday. So you'll be down in Brighton for 3 days. That's near Ditchling, isn't it?" "Well, I would say that Ditchling was near Brighton, but yes, it is nearby. Why do you ask?" "Oh, nothing really. It's just that my son lives in Ditchling. Suddenly, everything became clear. Jessica was taking the time off to visit our son in Ditchling, just a short car ride from the place her boss was staying for the next 3 days. It seemed absurd, but it was certainly an explanation. He made sure I had to work on social hours, so I wouldn't be home to question where my wife was. "Are you all right, Derek?" Jessica asked as I walked out the office. I obviously looked as stunned as I felt. I tried to pull myself together. "What?" "Oh yeah, I'm fine, just got something on my mind. Is it something I can help with?" "No, it's work-related. Nothing for you to worry about." That night I got home to find Jessica packing for her few days away. When I walked into the bedroom, she quickly closed her suitcase. Any other day, I wouldn't have thought much of it, but today, it had a new significance. It did puzzle me why she needed to take so many clothes for 3 days with our son and his wife. I did make a comment about the weight of the case as I lifted it off the bed. Next morning, I offered to drive Jessica to the station. "Oh, there's no need for that, Derek. I can get a cab." "Oh," I insist. "Why pay for a taxi when I have the time and a car to drive you?" What sort of husband would I be if I didn't make the most of every minute I can spend with my wife? "Well, okay then, but you won't be able to go onto the platform." She walked into the other room, taking her phone with her. We shared an uneventful trip to the station. Jessica told me how excited she was about visiting James and Emma. "It's a great shame you couldn't get time off and come with me, Derek." There was hardly a tremor in her voice. I had to admit she was good. These last 2 years we never seemed to get time off together. Still, all that will change soon. "What makes you say that? What have you done?" I thought I detected real anxiety. "Oh, nothing, but John's promised to look into it when he gets back from Brighton." "Hey, it's just occurred to me. You'll probably be traveling on the same train." "I don't think so, Derek. Anyway, he'll probably be in first class." She started to sound nervous. At the station, I carried her case to the barrier. "I'll call you when I get home from work at night." "No, don't, Derek. We may go out in the evening. I'll call you." She kissed me goodbye and told me she loved me. I left to go to work. It was going to be a busy few days. I had no problem wiring the bedroom. Just a single webcam was all I needed. Drilling the small hole through to the spare room to accommodate the cable was the biggest part of the job. I used that room as my study, so it was a piece of cake to connect the camera to my Linux box and schedule it to record every evening's activity. John Preston's office was a different matter. For a start, I had to gain access, and I didn't have a key. As in most colleges, the cleaners come in early in the morning. So 6:30 a.m. saw me arriving for work. I made my way to the management offices as the cleaner finished work. She was about to lock the door as I called out to her. "Don't bother to lock the door. I'm here now." "Oh, are you Mr. Preston? I'm pleased to meet you." It really was that easy. In order to automatically install updates, it was college policy to leave computers running all night. That meant I didn't even have to find a host for the camera. I used a wireless unit and his own desktop to host it. Using a spare account from a student who had recently left, I hacked into the college servers. Soon I had a direct stream to my desktop, which I could activate remotely. From then on, it was simply a matter of waiting for their return. On Friday morning, I rang my son at home. There was no answer. I called his work number. "Hello, James Callahan." "Hello, James. How are you?" "Oh, hello, Dad. I am fine. How about you?" "I am grand as usual, missing your mother, of course." I expected her to answer when I called the house. "Come to think of it, why aren't you there? Surely you could get a few days off for your mother's visit." He sounded embarrassed and didn't really want to talk to me. "Oh, I did take Wednesday and Thursday off, but I had to come in this morning. My boss is delivering a sales pitch on Monday, and I've got to make sure he has everything at his fingertips." "Yes, I suppose you do. So where's Emma? Did she have to work as well?" "No, she's probably gone shopping in Brighton with Mom." "Ah yes, Brighton. I might have known she'd end up there." "Look, Dad, I've really got to get this work done. Why don't you call Mom on her mobile?" "Yeah, maybe I will." "Well, I'd better not stop you working, James. Look after yourself." "You too, Dad. Bye." So that was that. He knew and was prepared to give her an alibi. I was sad to think that I'd probably never see or talk to him again. Wendy squeezed my hands. "So you disowned him?" I suppose I can understand that, if he knew what she was doing and kept it from you. I don't think it's right, but I can understand. I was starting to get very tense and Wendy could see it. I sat there, and she held me to her chest. I was certainly glad to have her with me. Looking down at those gorgeous jugs was some compensation for my world falling apart again. It took a few minutes for me to recover my composure. So you collected the evidence and got a divorce. They don't put you in prison for that, do they? No, Wendy, they don't, and if that's all I'd done, I would have been okay. I'm afraid I went further than that. You probably won't like me much when you find out. I think I'll be the judge of that, Derek. Now why don't you tell me the rest of the story before we call him in to see what he wants? When Jessica came home on Sunday, I did my best to act normally. To be honest, it wasn't difficult. We hardly ever had sex because she was always too tired. During the week, we hardly saw each other anyway. On Tuesday evening, I checked the live stream from John Preston's office. Sure enough, as soon as most people had left, Jessica joined him. They started hugging and kissing, and his hands were on her arse by the time I went to teach my class. During break, I checked again, just in time to see Jessica bend over his desk with no skirt or panties being screwed. By the end of classes, they had gone and the office was dark. The following day, they left on time, so there was nothing to check. However, my bedroom camera picked up significant action. It also raised questions. Why did Jessica never tell me she liked to be screwed while tied to the bed? God knows I would have done that for her. I would have been a lot more adventurous than John Preston. Hell, he didn't even use a blindfold. Thursday, they were at it in the office again. No wonder I didn't getting any sex. Even if she'd been awake, she would have been worn out. I'm ashamed to say, I let it go on another 2 weeks to see if there was a pattern. I didn't just want a divorce. I wanted to hurt them the way they had hurt me. I was running on autopilot. The only thing that kept me going to work every day was my anger. People at work commented on how snappy I'd become. Students asked what had happened to my famous sense of humor. The lovers, of course, noticed nothing. By the end of the second week, I knew what I was going to do. I knew next Thursday evening would be an office sex session, so I put a plan into action. No one was surprised to see Dirty Harry working at the weekend, so no questions were asked when I turned up. I used a library computer and another redundant account to set up a website with the name of officeantics.com. It had video streaming facilities, and I set up links to various adult sites to make it look authentic. Then I produced the posters for the notice boards around college. www.officeantics.com goes live 6 p.m. on Thursday, don't miss it. This week, for limited time only, this site goes live. And yes, it's going to be live. Be among the first to witness this amazing content. As the notices were taken down, I replaced them. I'd even managed to get them up on library and church notice boards around the town. Come Thursday, I was ready. At 5:30, I added the finishing touch to the website and dubbed over the top of the video display. It read, "Tonight's content comes to live from Braunceston College." At 5:55 p.m., I checked the live stream. Preston had started unbuttoning Jessica's blouse. I went off to my lesson, which was conveniently a computer class. After the first 5 minutes, it was clear we would get no work done. First, the whispers started. Then, as they got more excited, the level rose so that I could hear every word. "It's coming from this college. Hey, I recognize him. He's the vice principal. He teaches one of my maths classes. Who is the old slapper he's screwing? Dunno, but she's got a great pair of jugs on her. I know her. She's his secretary. Look, she's giving him a B job. I'm emailing my mates. They can't miss this." Up to that point, I had been somewhat ambivalent to the responses. On one hand, I was happy to expose the pair of them for the liars they were. On the other, he was screwing my wife, the woman I loved for more than 20 years. It was that love that made me forgive her so much in the past, but not this time. My lesson had already fallen apart, but then came the comment that pushed me over the top. "Oh my God, he's screwing her. Prezzer, you dirty scumsucker." My rage was released. Without really thinking about what I was doing, I left my class and hurried to the admin block. I couldn't believe they had been so complacent. They hadn't even locked the door. I charged into the office, grabbing Preston by the hair. I wrenched him off my wife and slammed his forehead against the edge of the open door. He fell to the floor, where I started kicking him, first in the balls and then as he rolled over. The kicks landed in the stomach and chest. I was in a rage. My anger was with both of them, but 20 years of love and an upbringing that said it was wrong to hit women meant that Preston got it all. I was conscious of Jessica screaming at me to stop. It was only when she threw herself on top of him that I did indeed stop. I stepped back, shocked at what I had done. As I walked backwards, I came to a chair and fell down onto it. Jessica looked up at me and realized that it was safe to get up. Still half naked, she ran into her outer office, returned with her phone. I heard her talking. "Ambulance," she said. "There has been an accident, and I think a man is badly injured." "Better call the police, Jess. Half the world knows it wasn't an accident. You might also consider getting dressed." "What do you mean half the world knows? How could they?" "Your antics tonight have been broadcast on the internet, and so has my attack on Preston here. In fact, it's still going out, so get dressed and call the police." "Oh, Derek, you haven't?" One look at my face told her I had. She ran around the office picking up her clothes and putting them on. As soon as she had covered herself, she called the police. She paced back and forth in the office before turning back to me. "How clear were the pictures, Derek? Could you see who we were?" "Well, my class recognized him immediately. They didn't know who you were, but I guess they do now." She put her hands to her face. "Oh God, Derek, what are we going to do?" "Well, I'm going to sit here and wait for the police. Perhaps you'd better go to the hospital with Loverboy here." "It wasn't love, Derek, just sex. Exciting sex because we were doing things we shouldn't, but just sex all the same. It doesn't matter anymore, Jess. You wanted or needed someone else, so now you don't have to sneak around. I'm going to be out of circulation for some time. You'll be free to screw who you like." She sat with her head in her hands crying. The paramedics arrived first and started to treat Preston. Jessica had to decide whether to go to hospital with him or not when the police arrived, and I was led away in handcuffs. It took the police a day to decide to charge me with grievous bodily harm. Within 2 days, I was in court being formally charged. I'd opted for the duty solicitor, and he tried to get me released on bail. I'd instructed him not to do so, but he felt he had to do his best for me. The magistrate asked if I could post bail. "Your Honor, I have little money. My parents are both dead, and I'm not in contact with my wife, nor do I wish to be. I can't see any way I can raise enough money to post bail." He gave me a searching look. "You realize, Mr. Callahan, without someone to post bail, I will have to remand you in custody. Would you like more time so that you can speak to your wife?" "No, sir. Custody is fine. I was on remand for 2 months. I got frequent visits from my solicitor trying to convince me to plead not guilty due to temporary insanity. I had several requests from Jessica for a visiting order so she could come and see me. I refused. My solicitor told me, under British law, a wife cannot be forced to give evidence against her husband, and Jessica had refused. Of course, it had gone out over the internet, so there would be plenty of other witnesses. When you're in prison, it's surprising what you find funny. I got a letter from the college human resource department informing me that I was the subject of a disciplinary hearing and asking who I wanted to represent my interests. I found it amusing that even in the face of overwhelming evidence, they still had to go through their procedures. I wrote back saying I was offering no defense. The next communication from them told me I'd been fired and all about the appeals procedure. Unable to get in to see me, Jessica also resorted to writing letters. "My dearest Derek, I have no idea how to apologize for what I've done to you. Please believe I didn't do it to hurt you, nor did love have anything to do with it. I can't explain why I did what I did, but I have to tell you that you are, and always have been, my one and only love. I know you have been dismissed by the college. They are waiting for John to get out of hospital before they hold his disciplinary hearing. He has several broken ribs and had a collapsed lung. The doctors aren't sure whether he will be infertile. I've told him I'll tell the principal that he used his position to force me to have sex with him unless he withdraws all charges and refuses to give evidence. I will do it, my love. I'll do anything to get you out of that place so that I can start to make amends from what I have done to you. No matter how long it takes, I will wait for you, my love, and I hope that one day you may be able to forgive me. All my love, Jessica." I screwed it up and threw it away. A month later, she wrote again. "My dearest Derek, I am so sorry, not just for what I've done to you, but also because I failed to persuade John to drop the charges. He didn't believe I would do what I said. He was wrong. I went with my union rep to see the principal. I told him John had pressured me into having sex with him and made sure you were always out of the way when we met. I don't know if he believed me, but it didn't matter. The union started a sexual harassment action. Both John and I were dismissed. Sad to say that has made John more determined to ensure you go to prison. I'm so sorry, my love. I tried my best. Your solicitor says you refuse to consider the only defense that might work. Please reconsider, my love. You don't deserve to be in that place. You did what you did because we drove you to it. I will always love you and will wait as long as it takes. All my love, Jessica. I have to admit, I was surprised they'd fired Preston. I'd expected the management to close ranks around him, but Jessica had given them no choice. My trial was almost a non-event. My barrister tried to persuade me to use the temporary insanity plea, but once again, I refused. I insisted I would plead guilty. I was happy for him to use extreme provocation and mitigation. My guilty plea meant the prosecution didn't have to offer any evidence other than the extent of John Preston's injuries. They did this using photographs and medical reports. He was peeved that he wasn't asked to tell the court his side of the story. Jessica and James were there. She was crying most of the time, and he was trying to comfort her. The judge listened to my barrister's pleas of mitigation before turning his attention to me. Mr. Callahan, your counsel has made a very good case that you were acting while the balance of your mind was disturbed. I take it the option to use that as a defense has been mentioned to you. Yes, sir, it has. Do you wish to change your plea? No, sir. I committed the crimes and I am willing to take my punishment. Very well. Derek Callahan, you have pleaded guilty to the charge that you assaulted Mr. John Preston, causing him grievous bodily harm. This is a very serious offense, and one for which I could hand down a sentence of up to 20 years in prison. However, your counsel has made a good case for extreme provocation in that Mr. Preston was abusing his power to keep you out of the way so he could have sex with your wife. I find this to be the sort of provocation few men could resist. Even given this situation, I would still be bound to sentence you to 10 years in prison. However, at the point of your arrest, you pleaded guilty to the charges, saving the taxpayer significant expense and saving your victim the trauma of reliving the attack. Under the guidelines given to me, I can, therefore, have the sentence. Mr. Callahan, I sentence you to spend 5 years in prison. I looked at the public gallery. Preston was punching the air as if he had won some sort of victory. Jessica just gasped and buried her head in her hands as the warders took me down to the cells. My barrister came to my cell after the trial. Well, Mr. Callahan, I still think I could have got you off, but 5 years is a good result. If you keep your nose clean, you could be out in 2.5 to 3 years. I suppose I should thank you for that, but to tell you the truth, I'm not sure I want to get out. What have I got to come out to? My family is destroyed. My career is in the toilet. I don't really care when I get out. Why didn't you tell me any of this before, Derek? It seems almost as if I don't know you at all. Would I have got this job if they'd known I had a criminal record? Of course not. Most people here wouldn't even talk to me if they knew. Would you have let me get close to you? Aren't you already wondering how you can dump me? If that is what you think, perhaps I should dump you, as you put it. I'm having a great deal of difficulty believing the man I know, the man I fell in love with, could do such a thing. From what you said, the violence was a split-second reaction which, given the circumstances, I can understand. It's the cold-blooded planning of your wife's total humiliation that I can't believe. The man you fell in love with wouldn't have done that. I am the man you know, at least I am now. Maybe the judge and the barrister were right. Maybe the balance of my mind was disturbed. I couldn't believe she would rip my heart out again, but Preston was the guy I wanted. He'd made me a laughing stock. They even called me Dirty Harry because I got all the shit jobs. Some of the others must have known it was so he could keep screwing my wife. In my head, I was hitting back at him and the college. Let's see them deny a live broadcast, I thought. It even went out through college servers, so they couldn't pretend it came from elsewhere. Jessica was just collateral damage. To my surprise, she pulled my head back down to her jug and held it there as I cried, reliving that fateful day. She lifted my head again and looked at me. Again, Derek? You said you didn't think she could rip your heart out again. Had you caught Jessica cheating on you before? I didn't catch her, no. She thinks I don't know, but it wasn't the first time. She's done it at least once before, shortly after we were married. If you didn't catch her, how can you be so sure? I've seen the evidence. Believe me, I'm sure. Just a minute, Derek. If you've been in prison, how did you get this job? I mean, you need clear criminal records check? I laughed. If people knew just how easy it is to get around those things, they wouldn't value them so highly. You would be amazed at how many Derek Callahans there are with clean records. I just had to become one of them. We both sat holding each other. I was relieved she hadn't left me. I'd lied my way into everything since I'd left prison, and I hadn't been able to tell Wendy the truth. Several times I'd come close, but each time, discretion got the better of my valor. I wanted to tell her, and if I'd been able to marry her, I would have. As it was, it didn't seem to be worth the risk of the information getting out. Wendy took her arm from around my shoulders and held both my hands in hers. Derek, you know we are going to have to speak to the young man outside. Now he has found you, the game is up. Unless, that is, we can persuade him to keep his mouth shut. Now I'm going to call him in. Then you are going to talk to him. Please, Derek, please talk to him. She got up and walked to the door. When she came back, James followed her in. James was a good-looking young man, standing 6 feet tall with broad shoulders and an athletic build. He had light brown hair which in the summer sun became almost blonde. He had a square jaw with a cleft chin, and his blue eyes sparkled when he smiled. A look at Wendy's face told me she was impressed. She looked at me, looked at him, and then back at me. Your wife must be a good-looking woman, Derek. He certainly doesn't take after you. I mean, I think you're quite a hunk, but James here must be every girl's dream. James smiled at her. I'll settle for being Emma's dream, thank you. Well, James, you and Derek must have a lot to talk about. I'm going to make some coffee. Would you like some? James accepted the offer of coffee, and Wendy went off to the kitchen, leaving us alone. For about a minute, we sat in silence. James was fidgeting while he watched me, unsure of how to start. I had no intention of making it any easier for him. I just relaxed on the sofa and waited. Eventually, he spoke. Why did you do it, Dad? Come off it, James. You and half the world know why I did it. I'm not talking about that. Why did you disappear like that? You knew she was waiting for you. When you didn't reply to any of her letters, she tried to get the governor to keep her informed and tell her when you would be released. We thought you had another 3 months to go when the police came and told us you were out. The prison gave Mum the address of the hostel you went to. I went there, but you were long gone. Why go to a hostel when you could have come home? Why risk going back to prison by just disappearing from the hostel? I don't know what she's told you about what I did and why, but even from what was reported, you must realize there was no way I could go back. What, not even for a few weeks, Dad? Do you really hate Mum so much that you would rather go to a bail hostel than go home to your own bed, even if it was only while you got back on your feet? She and her lover spent 2 years manipulating me. I wasn't going to give her another chance. You should have read her letters. She wanted to try to make it up to you. She knows how much she hurt you. She wanted to try to put things right. I've had enough of this, James. You didn't search for me just to ask why I didn't go home. What is it you want from me? What happens if you don't get it? Are you going to tell the police where I am so they can put me back in prison? I want you to come back and talk to her. She's ill, Dad, very ill. She was okay when she thought you would come back, but when you disappeared, she hit the bottle. Now she has cirrhosis of the liver and needs a transplant. They won't do that while she is still drinking. I hate what she did to you, Dad, but she's the only mom I've got. I can't see her killing herself like this. I need you to tell her you forgive her. Tell her to stop the drinking. Or what, James? What happens if I don't go with you? Do I need to move on before the police come after me for breaking my parole conditions? Or nothing, Dad. I don't want to see you back in that place, and I don't think the police are interested. When I asked them to help me find you, they just said they would find you when you committed another crime. Wendy came in with the coffee. Sounds like James is talking sense here, Derek. You need closure, and if that helps your wife, then so much the better. I know you don't really wish her any harm. How do you know? Because you beat him to a pulp, but never laid a finger on her. I sat for a minute. I'd never thought about it before, but she was right. I wouldn't have dreamed of hurting Jessica in spite of her cheating. What harm can it do to talk to her, Derek? So now it was 2 against 1 and I was losing. Okay, I'll go and talk to her, but don't expect anything to change. She'll have to accept the fact that I'm not coming back. I'll talk to her on one condition," I said, turning to James. "You stop calling me Dad." He just sat shaking his head. "One mistake 2.5 years ago and he disowns me. What the hell can I do?" "Give him time, James. I'm sure he'll come round." "You don't know him. I let him down. I know I did, and now he'll never forgive me or Mom." We left the next morning, all three of us. James didn't want Wendy to come because he didn't want Jessica to know I had found someone else. I insisted that she should come with us. I wanted everything out in the open. He tried to make conversation on the journey, but it was an uphill struggle for James. I didn't intentionally ignore him. My mind was too occupied for any talking. All the time I was reliving those days running up to the main event and my assault on Preston. It felt strange pulling into the drive of my old house. If I didn't know better, I would have sworn it was empty. The grass needed cutting. The curtains hung loosely at the windows, which were in dire need of cleaning. James had his own key and let us in through the front door. I had never seen my house in such a mess. He led us into the living room and asked us to sit down. He went upstairs to fetch his mother. He took quite some time to come down with her. When Jessica came in, I barely recognized her. Her face was gaunt and her skin had a yellowish tinge to it. She had lost a lot of weight and the dress she wore just hung on her. When she saw me, she tried to smile and held her arms out to me. "Derek, you've come home." "No, Jess, I've come to talk to you." "I'm not coming home, ever." Wendy squeezed my hand and looked lovingly at me, which made Jessica look uncomfortable. James helped her to a seat. "I'd like to say you are looking well, Jess, but you must know that's not true. Same old Derek, can't lie to save your life. They told me that's why you ended up in prison. Water under the bridge, Jess." All finished with. "Now James says you want to talk to me, so why not just say what you have to say? Now you're finally here, I don't know where to start. Did you read any of my letters?" "Only the 2 you sent while I was on remand. The rest I didn't even open." "Do you hate me that much, Derek?" "You didn't have to reply, but if I could just believe you read them, I'd have felt so much better." "Hate had nothing to do with it, Jess, quite the reverse. I loved you so much the only way I could deal with what we did to each other was to cut that part right out of my life. I never wanted to think of it again. You want to know why I didn't read any of your letters? It's because in prison a man who sits in his cell and weeps might as well be a dead man. So that's it, is it, Derek? You've cut me out of your life with no chance of forgiveness?" "I don't know, Jess. I don't hate you, so perhaps I have forgiven you already. I hate what you did just as I hate what I did. What I did to you was cruel and heartless. I should have just divorced you. Come to think of it, I should have divorced you the first time." Jessica's mouth fell open. She pulled her hands up to her face and cried. As she regained her control, she looked at me through red eyes. "You've known for all those years and said nothing? Why? It was over when I found out, and it gave you the child I seemed to be unable to provide." I pulled a worn and tatty envelope from my pocket and passed it to James. "That's why you shouldn't call me Dad. I'm not your father." James looked at the letter as he took it from the envelope. "I don't understand. What is this?" "It's the results of a DNA paternity test. You were the subject, and as you can see, we are not related." The only sound in the room was Jessica sobbing. Wendy was looking from James to Jessica, not knowing who to comfort first. In the end, she settled on Jessica. James was in shock. "I don't understand. If you're not my father, then who is?" "I think it was a bloke called Donald Wilson. He and your mother were very friendly for a while, too friendly for my liking. She assured me there was nothing to it. They seemed to fall out around the time your mom became pregnant. 6 months after you were born, he died in a car crash. So, how long have you known?" "According to the date, I was 2 when this test was done. I suspected the truth within a couple of months of your birth. Neither of us had blue eyes, and we both have dark hair. When your eyes didn't turn brown or even green, I realized you probably weren't mine. It kept eating away at me. I had to know. When paternity tests became affordable, I had you tested. For all those years you knew, and you didn't do or say anything. Why? A boy needs a father, and we needed a child. So just like that, you decided to bring up another man's child and say nothing to anyone about it for 25 years. Didn't you think that I had a right to know? Let me ask you something, James. In the first 20 of those years, Did you ever feel unwanted or unloved? Right up to the point when you decided to collude with your mother in deceiving me, did you ever feel less than my beloved son? You know I didn't. For what it's worth, I didn't know what was happening. Mom told me she was arranging some sort of surprise for you. The way I see it, James, your mother's still your mother. Your father's dead, and you've had the benefit of a stepfather for 25 years. Unless you are saying that I shouldn't have given you that, get off your high horse and accept it. Wendy interrupted us in an attempt to calm things down. Derek, I think we could all do with a cup of tea. Why don't we go and make one while James and Jessica get over the bomb you just dropped? I took Wendy out to the kitchen. We were confronted with a scene I never thought I'd see. The sink was full of dishes. The worktops were dirty and liberally sprinkled with empty bottles. Wendy and I looked around us before looking at each other. Sorry, Wendy. Looks like a cleanup is top priority. She stood in front of me, threw her arms around me and hugged me tightly. I said yesterday, you weren't the man I knew. I take that back. Any man who's been through what you have for all those years was bound to go a little crazy. You really should have gone for temporary insanity. She pulled my head down and kissed me. Right, Derek, let's get stuck in. We cleared the work surfaces of bottles and washed them down before making a start on the dishes. An hour later, we returned with the tea. James and his mother sat together on the sofa with their arms around each other. Wendy served the tea to Jessica, who looked her up and down. Derek has been very remiss in not introducing you. Are you his girlfriend? Look after him. He needs a good woman. I will if he'll let me. My nervousness had made me forget the protocols. I introduced Wendy as my friend. I think she is more than that, Derek. You look at her the way you used to look at me, before I threw it all away. You're right, Jess. She is more than a friend. She is the best thing to happen to me in more than 5 years. But we aren't here to discuss me and Wendy, are we? You wanted to talk to me, so what did you want to say? We sat silently drinking our tea. Jessica trying to get her head sorted, ready to say what she needed to get off her chest. She took a deep breath, looked me in the eye and spoke. Derek, James has made me realize that there is no chance of you coming back home. It's not my home anymore, Jess. Please don't interrupt, Derek. This is hard enough. I'd like to try to explain, as much as I understand it myself. She paused and then started again. It's not enough, but I am sorry for what I did to you. I've tried to understand why I did it, because I really do love you. I suppose that must be difficult to believe. You see, I've always been able to compartmentalize my life, almost as if I had more than one life. In the compartment with John Preston, you only existed as a sort of abstract concept, a sort of notional husband. In your compartment, he was just a faceless person who was your boss. When I was with him, I'm sorry to say I never thought of you. When you and I were together, I never thought about him. Of course, there was a sort of in-between time when I balanced the two, and that was the only time I felt guilty about what I did to you. I felt guilty, Derek. Really, I did. But it was such a turn on. The man had power over you and me. They say power is an aphrodisiac, and it is. He had the power to make me available for him by ensuring you were always out of the way. The fact that he wanted me was enough. I said he used his position to force me into it, but he didn't have to force me. I just said that to try to get him to drop the assault charges. So there was no love there then? None at all, Derek. It was just sex and the excitement of doing things I shouldn't with a man with power. So why did you lay on top of him to protect him from me? That was to protect you from yourself. I've never seen you like that. I thought you were going to kill him. I didn't know you were streaming it out to the internet. I thought if he wasn't too badly injured, we could say he had an accident. You took a hell of a risk. I might have hurt you too. No, you couldn't do that, Derek. Not you. No matter what state you were in, you wouldn't hurt me. Preston would never have said it was an accident. If I was the only witness, he wouldn't have had much choice. But you had to send it out on the internet. Why did you do that? Did you hate me that much? I realized most of the college management must have known what was happening. I wanted to make sure Preston and the rest of them couldn't wriggle out of it. So, I made sure there were plenty of witnesses. They couldn't deny it happened once the video went out on the internet. I wasn't aiming to hurt you, but at the time, I didn't really care if I did. I didn't intend to attack him. I just sort of lost it. Well, if you wanted to hurt the college management, you certainly succeeded. Even the head of IT services got fired. The college was taken over by Amblesham College. You should have read my letters, Derek. You destroyed them all. I couldn't get a job either. I had to go temping just to make ends meet. All of a sudden, James joined the conversation. Perhaps Dad wouldn't have lost it if it was the first time you cheated him, but you'd already done it before when you screwed my father. Jessica snapped back at him with a force she didn't look capable of. Don't you ever call that scumsucker your father. He was just a little shit who was happy to get his end away, but ran a mile when he found I was pregnant. Things got very tense in our marriage at the time due to our failure to have children. When I met Donald, I was easy prey for anyone who could offer a friendly shoulder. He offered me sympathy and made me think Derek didn't really want children. He gradually worked his way into my knickers. I thought I loved Donald and I thought he loved me, but I was wrong on both counts. When I became pregnant, I thought he'd be pleased and leave the wife he said he didn't love. Instead, he wanted me to pass you off as Derek's child and carry on as before. I realized he didn't love me. I was just a bit on the side for him. I told him I never wanted to see him again, and I never did. I'm glad he died because then he'd never try to claim you as his. When I told your father, Derek, your real father, was overjoyed and couldn't wait to be a daddy. I had no idea that he knew. James was left in limbo, and I have to say I felt sorry for him. However, I still found it difficult to forgive him, not for being someone else's son, but for colluding with his mother to deceive me. Emotions were running high, and it was getting too much for me. I had to bring it to an end. So Jess, you wanted to see me and now you have. Where do we go from here? You must realize there is no way back for us. I suppose you're right, Derek. I had hoped I could make it up to you, but I can see that's a tall order. I wonder, could we possibly be friends? That depends on you, Jess. I don't have many drunks as friends. I'll get cleaned up, Derek. I will. I've got a place on a residential program to get dried out. If I stay off the booze for 6 months, they'll consider me for a liver transplant. Do you think you'll manage it? I'll try, Derek, especially if we can be friends. I know you don't feel you can come and see me, but can I write to you? Will you read my letters? You write him, and I'll read him, Jess. I can't promise anymore. We wound things up, and I got back in the car for the long drive home. At first, it was a quiet ride. Wendy repeatedly squeezed my leg or pressed her face to my arm. When we pulled into a motorway service center, we started to chat. It was small talk at first while we decided whether or not to eat there. When we decided we would and sat down, Wendy decided to get to the point. Do I know everything now, Derek? Or is there any more to come out? Only what happened in prison. I haven't told anyone about that, and I probably never will. She reached out and squeezed my hand. Was it really that awful? I did things in there I was pleased about, but I also had to do things I wouldn't normally have dreamed of. However, my life was a lot better than many. Do you think you will ever be friends with Jessica? I don't know. I'll try. That's as much as I can say right now. What about James? You dropped quite a bombshell on him today. The ball is in his court now that he knows the truth. It's up to him to decide what he wants to do. Wendy reached across and took both of my hands in hers. You know you made me very proud of you today, don't you? Well, I do now. I smiled at her. Do I get a reward? I'd say there is a very good chance, she said with a grin. We finished our meal and walked back to the car with our arms around each other. I was indeed rewarded that night, and for many the following nights. Jessica's first letter arrived after her first week in the rehab center. She found it difficult to live without alcohol, but expressed a determination to see it through. She couldn't resist some words of apology, but made no further attempt to persuade me to go back to her. I was impressed and wrote back offering encouragement. For 3 months we exchanged letters, each one more cordial than the previous one. I began to believe we could be friends. She got out of rehab, gained a bit of weight, and found herself a job. She still had health issues and was still on the list for a transplant. I was hopeful for her recovery. It came as a surprise when the correspondence came to an end. Things had seemed to be going well, and then she didn't reply to my letters. I was surprised at how it affected me. I felt she had let me down again. Wendy tried to keep my spirits up. She told me there was probably a good reason for it, and she would be back in touch sooner or later. The first snow of winter came on the first day of December. By the following weekend, we had 2 inches of white stuff covering the landscape. The estate staff had cleared the paths, but the grass and all the surrounding landscape changed to the sort of view you see on Christmas cards. I had finished my Saturday morning classes. Walking out into the quad, I was taken completely by surprise. James was leaning against the wall of the arch and greeted me as I came out of the lab. "Well, Dad, even in the winter it still looks beautiful. One hell of a place to hide out." "James, you know the whole story now, so you know we are not related. Look, I know what you said, but Mom was right. It doesn't matter whose sperm did the job. You are the only father I have ever known, and I think you did a damn good job. So no matter what you say, I will always think of you as my dad, and I'm sorry I let you down." I put my arm around his shoulders. "For what it's worth, you're still the best son I ever had." We started to walk down the path towards the cloisters. "Jessica hasn't written for a while. How is she?" James stopped and put his hand on my forearm. "She's dead. She died last Friday of multiple organ failure. They thought it was a urinary tract infection, but then her kidneys packed up. While they were trying to stimulate them, her heart stopped. After the first heart attack, she signed a do not resuscitate agreement. She couldn't face a lifetime on dialysis, and they wouldn't do her liver unless they could find a kidney as well." I stopped and looked at him. I saw the tears coming to his eyes as I felt them welling up in mine. There were no barriers between us now. We threw our arms around each other and openly wept. We stood for several minutes, locked in an embrace with our bodies shaking as we sobbed. I fought back the tears as I pulled away from him and dried my eyes with a tissue. Why didn't she tell me? She didn't have to die alone. She wasn't alone, Dad. I was with her. So why didn't you call me? She knew I'd forgiven her. I would have come if you'd called me. That's why she wouldn't let me tell you. The reason the letters stopped is because someone let the papers know she was writing to you. She got a visit from a reporter. With the anniversary of the event coming up, he wanted to find you. Mom was determined that she wouldn't be the cause of any more misery for you. She knew you couldn't be a teacher with a criminal record, so either the school hadn't checked or you had obtained one by fraud. If that got out, you'd be finished again. She wouldn't let it happen and told me I was not to contact you. After all this time, they are still stirring it up? Are you sure?" "Oh yes, I'm sure. The slimy scumsucker sought me out as well. Tried to tell me he wanted to tell your side of the story. Mom told me it would only be bad for you. I know it's hard to believe after what she did, but she really did love you. You're right. It is hard, but I am grateful for yours and her consideration. I did love her. After all those years, I can't just turn that off." "When's the funeral?" "Tuesday, but don't even think of turning up. You can't take the risk. If you're not there, our friendly reporter may just give up." I put my arm around his shoulders as we turned and walked back towards my flat. "Come on, son. Let's see if Winnie can rustle up some lunch for you. I think we're way ahead of you there, Dad. Emma and I got here about 10. She and Winnie have been working on lunch for a while. They went shopping about 10:30. We reached my front door, and I let us into an empty flat. I got a beer for James and myself. We sat on the sofa drinking while waiting for the girls to get back. "So, Dad, what happens to us now? Mom was the only link between us, yet she's gone. What happens now? Am I ever going to see you again?" "Don't get me wrong, James. Wendy didn't imagine Jessica was going to die, but she asked me a similar question on the way back from our visit. We may not share the same DNA, but I always thought of you as my son and loved you like my own. As I said before, all those years of love can't be turned off, but it had to be your decision. So the question is, James, what do you want to happen?" He sat and sipped his beer. "I don't want anything to happen. I want Mom's death to change nothing. Like she said, you are my real father. I will always think of you as my dad, and I want you to always think of me as your son. If that's what you want, then that's the way it'll be," I said as put my arm around him. We both struggled to keep the tears from our eyes as we held each other. We were still locked in an embrace when the door opened and Wendy came in. "Well, it looks like you boys have come to your senses." James and I parted. I got up to help with the shopping. Emma followed Wendy into the flat. She saw me, let out a scream, and ran towards me. "Oh, Derek, it's so good to see you. It's been a long time, far too long." She stepped back and looked at me. "You are looking very well. This place must agree with you." I looked her up and down. My son certainly had good taste. She had shoulder-length, honey blonde hair, blue eyes, plump lips, and high cheekbones. Then I remembered, and as my gaze moved down, I saw the reason. Her normally trim figure now had a prominent bulge in the front. I see you've noticed Derek Jr. Isn't it great? I smiled. Derek Jr.? Are you serious? If you don't mind. James wanted it and I agreed. We love you, Derek. James was heartbroken about what happened to you. He loved Jessica too. So what happened tore him apart. As soon as we found out we were having a boy, James wanted to name him after you. Please say it's all right with you. What could I say? It was fine by me. The three of us sat down to chat while Wendy prepared the lunch. The atmosphere at the table was strained, a sweet and sour affair. The tears of joy at the reunion of our family mixed with the tears of sadness at Jessica's passing. I found it hard not to be able to attend her funeral, but her reasons were sound. For the first time since that fateful night, I came to realize I had forgiven her. I still couldn't understand why she did it, but I had to accept. In some strange way, she did love me. Perhaps if I didn't turn up to the funeral, the press would leave me alone. Wendy certainly thought so because she started making arrangements for Christmas. James, I'm sorry, but I really hope Derek would spend Christmas with me and my daughters. What I would like is to come to you for New Year. It would be like a new beginning for us all. Emma was overjoyed. Wendy, I think that's a great idea. We can have my parents for Christmas and then you and Derek for New Year. James moved on to practical subjects. The house is all yours now. You need to give some thought to what you are going to do with it. Then, of course, there's the money. Money? What money? I thought she was broke. The union launched an action against the college for sexual harassment. They settled out of court for £40,000. She wouldn't touch the money because she knew it was a lie. But once she started the action, she couldn't back down. She had intended to give you the money when you got out of prison to help you get back on your feet. I can't deal with that now, James. I'll have to think about it. We did spend Christmas with Wendy's daughters, and I was made very welcome. Both were pleased their mother had found someone. We got to Ditchling late New Year's Eve morning. I talked to James about the house and the money. We agreed he would handle the letting of the house. I had rented a flat on a short-term contract, just long enough to get a utility bill so I could set up a bank account. As soon as the account was set up, I gave up the flat and did everything through the internet. James said he would get the solicitor to transfer the funds to my new account. You know, James, just like your mother, I don't want the money. It's tainted. Well, someone has to have it, Dad, unless you want the bankers to have it. Wendy and I have been talking. We want you to set up a trust fund for the education of Derek Jr. and any other children you might have. When you've done that, I'll transfer all the cash into it. Something good has to come out of that mess. If that's what you want, Dad, I'll do it. Pay the income from the house into the new account, and I can take it out in cash. Well, if you're careful, that should keep your whereabouts secure. That night, we all went out to a New Year party. Around midnight, we had the obligatory countdown and the toast to the new year. When the cheering died down, I looked at my little party and filled their glasses before proposing another toast. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you new beginnings. We all raised our glasses in the toast. As we put them down, I walked around and knelt on one knee in front of Wendy. Wendy Turnbull, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Wendy threw her arms around my neck. Oh, yes, Derek. Yes, yes, yes. I put the engagement ring on her finger. It was a perfect fit, and so were we. As she sat looking at the chip of diamond, I stood up. I had the best feeling I'd had in more than 7 years. It truly was a new beginning. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.